that you have in your books? You ready? Got it? Good. So, what you've got is you've got some peas, and then you've got some fluid with your potassium hydroxide. What does the potassium hydroxide do? What do you think it might do? Pick up the CO2. So that absorbs the CO2. So basically the only volume that's coming into here is air, which contains oxygen and carbon dioxide and nitrogen, but the only volume that then goes back out is oxygen. No, yes, oxygen. So therefore, what's going to happen is the total volume here, so at the moment I've got a red up here, and this whole volume of air can be taken into here, into the peas. They will respire, the carbon dioxide will stay in there, so hopefully this trace of red will move down the tube and then move up. And I can measure, using this graph paper here, the distance moved by this red fluid. If I measure the distance moved by the red fluid, I will be able to calculate, knowing the diameter of this cylinder, the volume of oxygen that these peas have taken in to respire. Does that make sense to everybody? So this is called a respirometer, and we can use it to measure oxygen uptake in peas, in maggots, in locusts, any organism. So you would put the organism in this side with some potassium hydroxide, and then in this tube, so that it's a closed system, and that means that there's no influence from the atmospheric oxygen and pressure into the system, so any changes in the fluid movement are purely due to the respiration in here. In this tube, I therefore put the same volume as the volume of organisms of water, fluid and potassium hydroxide, so that any carbon dioxide is just being absorbed. So I've got my two tubes, it's a closed system, peas are respiring, they take in the oxygen, the carbon dioxide gets moved into here, so the volume of gases in here moves along this tube, that causes this red fluid to move along the tube as well. I measure the distance moved, I use it to calculate the volume of oxygen taken up, and I get an oxygen consumption for these organisms. And that is proportional to the amount of respiration that they're doing. So that's why it's called a respirometer. Is that alright for everyone? Does that make sense? You could get a question on this in the exam, just asking you why might you not use a spirometer on a pea plant or on a pea. They don't ventilate. The spirometer is used for organisms that ventilate. Why would I not use a spirometer on fish? What do they move in and out? Water. Do they move it in and out? No. What do they do? Right, it passes down a pressure gradient in one side and out the other, so they're only doing it in one direction. So a spirometer is useful for looking at mammals breathing. It allows us to measure the oxygen consumption because the carbon dioxide is scavenged. Can you remember what it's scavenged by? The soda lime, very good. So that decreases the total volume of gases that are in the chamber. So if the chamber is closed, that means that as the trace continues, it goes down, and you can measure the start volume and the final volume to measure your oxygen consumption using a spirometer. Respirometers for organisms that don't ventilate, spirometer for organisms that ventilate using oxygen and air. Okay, thank you.